Good day, viewers. I am Masana JCC. So I'm here to continue with our English language lessons. Last class, we started looking at phrases, and then we are able to define a phrase. And then from there, we also move on to look at one type of phrase, that is noun. So if you can recall, we talked about noun phrases by looking at the functions that they do. We talked about noun phrases acting as subjects of verbs, objects of verbs, subject complements, object complements, and many more. So today we intend to continue by looking at adverbs. Now, just as I said last class, when you look at a phrase or even a clause, you only name it as noun, adjectival, or adverb based on its functionality in a given structure. If the phrase is playing role of a noun, you call it noun. If it is playing role of an adjective, you call it adjectival. And if it is playing role of an adverb, you call it adverbial. So already we know adverbial phrases, just like adverbs as words, they have three main functions. That is to modify a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. So now we are moving on to adverbial phrase. Good. Now, when you look at it, we are going to start looking. Already we looked at definition. Definition of an adverbial phrase. You see, adverbial phrase is a group of words that function as an adverb. You get the point. So, and what it does is to modify a verb, adjective, or another adverb. In other words, adverbial phrase or phrases gives us additional information about a particular verb, adjective, or another adverb. So any group of words which modify a verb, adjective, or another adverb, you call it adverbial phrase. So that's it. So already I know you wouldn't confuse phrases from clauses, because we did say that when you come to a phrase, it's a group of words with or without a non-finite verb. So it means if you are given a group of words and there's no verb at all, you call that a phrase. There could still be group of words with verbs, they are phrases, but we said they have to be non-finite verb. How do I mean by non-finite verb? A non-finite verb is a verb that cannot change its form when the subject changes or when the time changes. So the verb will remain as it is. When the subject is singular and is changed to plural, the verb will not change. When the subject is plural, you want to change the verb to whatever, it won't change. So it means the verb will remain the same. And if you want to change the time, the action could be in the past or whatever, the verb will not change to agree with time. So in short, phrases are a group of words with or without a non-finite verb. So from adverbial phrase, from definition, we are going to look at types of adverbial phrase. Types of adverbial phrases. Good. Now, types of adverbial phrases. Adverbial phrases have many types. You get the point? Now we have one adverbial phrase of time. Adverbial phrase of time. That's one thing. Adverbial phrase of time. We have also adverbial phrase of place. Good. Also we have adverbial phrase of frequency. We have adverbial phrase of degree. Now also we have adverbial phrase of reason. Now we also have adverbial phrase of purpose. And then we also have adverbial phrase of adverbial phrase of manner. Now, also we have adverbial phrase of condition. As well as adverbial phrase of concession. So all these are types. You get the point. So you take note. When you come to adverbial phrases, all these are different types. Okay? So first we have adverbial phrase of time. It indicates time. Adverbial phrase of place also it shows direction or indicate direction. Adverbial phrase of frequency it also tells how often something is done or happens. Adverbial phrase of degree is also to what extent something happens. Adverbial phrase of reason and purpose are virtually similar. It indicates the reason why something happens. Adverbial phrase of manner is also indicate how something is done. Now, let's start looking at adverbial phrase of time. This phrase answers the question when. Now, adverbial phrase of time answers the question when. So you take note. Now it means now we have adverbial phrase of time. Let's start with adverbial phrase of time. It answers the question when. It answers the question when. So you take note of that. That's very important. Now let's look at some examples on the adverbial phrase of time. You get the point? It says, she walked throughout her stay. He walked throughout her stay. His stay in Manwar. Now, throughout his stay in Manwar is the adverbial phrase of time here. You get the point? So, throughout his stay in Manwar. So, this is adverbial phrase of time and it modifies the verb walked. Now, it means if you are given this to answer, then the grammatical name you say adverbial phrase of time. Function you say it modifies the verb walked. Now, from here you say I slept. Example 1, example 2, I slept for 2 hours. For 2 hours. You get the point? It's also indicating time. You get the point? Adverbial phrase of time and it modifies the verb slept. Another example you say just before, example it says just before sunset, the rebels retreated. Now, if you say just before sunset, this is underlined. You get the point? The rebels retreated. So just before sunset is also indicating time. So it's an adverbial phrase of time and then it modifies the verb retreated. You get the point? So therefore, these are some examples. You see, also you can say, example 4, you can say we left some 5 days ago. Assuming this is some 5 days ago, you see, it's also indicating time, and then it modifies the verb left. So this is an adverbial phrase of time, it modifies the verb left. Take note, I've said in my previous lesson that some words like a, and, or some can introduce both noun and adverbial phrases. So you take note. In this context, some 5 days ago, you see, answers the question when. You see, when did we leave? Some 5 days ago. So therefore, this is an adverbial phrase of time. So you take note of it. Good. Then we move on to adverbial phrase of place. This is a adverbial phrase of time, And we are moving on to B, adverbial phrase. Adverbial phrase of place. Now we have it here. Now this phrase answers the question where. You see, adverbial phrase of place answers the question where. So you take note. We did say that when you come to noun phrases, they answer the question who or what. That is, if you place who or what before or after a verb and make a question, the underlined word will serve as answer. Now when you come to adverbial, they also respond to certain questions. For instance, if you say adverbial phrase of place, it answers the question where. Example, if we say example 1, if we say the rebels, you see, launch an attack behind the hills. Now, behind the hills is indicating place. So it will answer the question, where did the rebels launch their attack? So therefore, this behind the hills is an adverbial phrase of place, and it modifies the verb launch. So that's it. So another example, if we say it rained almost everywhere. Now we have example 2, it rained almost everywhere. Now, almost everywhere is also indicating place. You see, where did it rain? Almost everywhere. So this is an adverbial phrase of place, and it modifies the verb rained. From there we have another example. Example 3, we say example 3, Americans killed Osama bin Laden somewhere in Pakistan. Now, somewhere in Pakistan is the adverbial phrase here. You get the point? So, it is indicating where. It answers the question where. Where was bin Laden killed? Somewhere in Pakistan. So, this adverbial phrase of place, and it modifies the verb killed. So, this modifies the verb killed. So, you take note. Then from there, we move on to another example. If we say the dove, example 4, we may say the dove perched on the branch. That on the branch is answering the question where. Where did the dove perch on the branch? So on the branch is an adverbial phrase of place, and it modifies the verb perch. So therefore, that's it for adverbial phrase of time and then place. So we are moving on to another one. That's adverbial phrase of frequency. Adverbial phrase of frequency. Good. So this is the other one. You see, so this answers the question how often. So adverbial phrase of frequency answers the question how often. That's how often. How often. Good. Now it means it answers the question how often you do or say something or so. The third example, adverbial phrase of frequency. So this answers the question how often. You get the point. So let's look at example. Example 1, it says Janke goes to the market once in every day. You get the point. Now, by looking at this, once in every day, answer how often does Janke go to the market? Get the point. So it answers the question how often. You see, if I say to Mohammed visits me twice in every year. Now, twice in every year, you see, is the phrase there. So it answers the question, how often does Mohammed visit me? So the answer is going to be twice in every year. So it's an adverbial phrase of frequency, and then it modifies the verb visits. Then from there, we move on to the other one. We write our exam. We write our exam at the end of every semester. Every semester. Now, you see, so when you look at this, you get the point? So at the end of every semester, you see, is the phrase here. How often do you write your exam at the end of every semester? So it's indicating the frequency in which you write your exam. So also we have another example, as often as necessary, we drank the water. Now for, if we say as often as necessary, we drank the water. Now assuming this is, now as often as necessary is on the line. This answers how often do we drink water? As often as necessary. So this is an adverbial phrase of frequency. It modifies the verb drank. So basically, also we may have another one. You can say she eats Benachin thrice or twice, for instance, twice in every week. Now, twice in every week is also indicating frequency. That's how often does she eat Benachin? Twice in every week. So it's an adverbial phrase of frequency. So basically that's it for adverbial phrase of frequency. And now we are moving on to the other category, which is adverbial phrase of manner. Now, just like others, this adverbial phrase of manner, you see, it answers the question how. How? It answers the question how. It answers the question how. So you take note. Example 1. My friend walks like a king. Now, like a king is on a line. So when you look at this, it is an adverbial phrase of manner. It answers the question, how does your friend walk? He walks like a king. So this is an adverbial phrase of manner, and it modifies the verb walks. So it means the grammatical name, you say it is an adverbial phrase, and then the grammatical function, you say it modifies the verb walks. Another example on the adverbial phrase of manner is she smiled in a lustful way. Ami smiled in a lustful way. Now, in a lustful way is on a line here. You get the point. How did Ami smile in a lustful way? So in a lustful way is answering the question how. And then it is an adverbial phrase of manner. It modifies the verb smiled. From there we move on to the other example. Example 3, we have 3. Did doctor stitch my wound very meticulously? Now, The doctor stitched my wound very meticulously. This very meticulously is an adverbial phrase of manner. It answers the question, how was my wound stitched? So this is going to answer the question, how. So it means this adverbial phrase of manner, and then it modifies the verb stitch. You get the point? So it's very simple. When you look at the phrase, look at the relationship it has with the main verb in this context, and then that does it. Then we move on to another example 4. It says the vehicle, example 4, the vehicle swerved widely across the road. Now the vehicle swerved widely across the road. Take note, the vehicle swerved widely across the road, and now you have widely across the road. Now when you look at this, the vehicle swerved widely across the road. So widely across the road is also an adverbial phrase, and it answers the question how. How did the vehicle swerve widely across the road? So it's an adverbial phrase of manner. So it answers the question how. From there we move on to another example. It says, okay, we move on to another type of adverbial phrase. Now I hope you are following. We talked about frequency, we've talked about manner, and now we are moving on to adverbial phrase of reason. Now we are moving on to adverbial phrase of reason. Let's look at this other one too. Now, adverbial phrase of reason answers the question why. It answers the question why. So you take note. Adverbial phrase of reason answers the question why. You get the point? So let's look at examples here. The baby cried because of the noise. Like example 1, if we say the baby cried because of the noise. Now, because of the noise is underlined here. You get the point? So this answers the question why. Why did the baby cry? Because of the noise. So this is adverbial phrase. Now you can write it like this. You say it is an adverbial phrase. For instance, adverbial phrase, and grammatical function, you say it modifies the verb cried. So you take note. You may put there adverb phrase of reason. It modifies whatever. But if you also limit yourself to only adverbial phrase and you get it right, you still get the same score. In other words, you can indicate the type, or you can limit yourself to only indicating the name. That's adverbial phrase, noun phrase, noun adjectival phrase, and then that's all. So we move on to another example 2. So that's one. The baby cried because of the noise. So we have because of the heavy rain, we rejected their request. Now you have because of the rain, we rejected their offer. Now, because of the rain is on the line. Now, just like the previous one, because of the noise. Now, when you look at these two, it means this other one is a post modifier, and this one is a pre modifier. It means you can use the phrase to modify a verb that precedes it, and you can equally use the same equal phrase to modify a verb it precedes. Now, in this context, you see because of the noise has been underlined after the verb cried, and that's why we say it is an adverbial phrase, and in grammatical function we say it modifies the verb cried. When you come to this other one, we say because of the rain, we rejected their offer. Now, when you look at this, because of the rain, it modifies the verb rejected, because that's the only verb among the underlined words. So you call this adverbial phrase of reason, and then it modifies the verb rejected. So we move on to example 3. So already as you are flowing, one thing you need to know is that when you come to adverbial phrases, you may either have subordinating conjunctions as the head word like because, before, or so, although, or you may have a preposition or even an adverb. Now we have 3. The director resigned due to bad health. Now, due to bad health is underlined here. So you see, this answers the question, why? Why did the director resign? You say due to bad health. So this adverbial phrase of reason, and then it modifies the verb resigned. From there, we have another example on the example 4. We say Makang fled to escape arrest. Now we have this. Now it says Makang fled to escape arrest. Now this escape arrest is underlined. So it means Makang. Why did Makang flee? You say to escape arrest. So this given a reason why this man fled. So basically that's it. So also we have the last one. We ran to catch the bus. For instance, that's going to be we ran to catch the bus. So it means when you look at this, to catch the bus is underlined. So this also adverbial phrase of reason. Take note, we have the word catch, but remember the word catch here is preceded by to. So and that has disabled the word. It cannot change from singular to plural or vice versa, nor can it change from present to past or vice versa. So once a verb is preceded by to, that has disabled it, and then it cannot change from one form to another, irrespective of changes on the subject or time. Already we discussed this. We talked about verbs in ing form. We talked about verbs acting as adjectives or in PP form or past participle form. And this is typical example. To catch the bus, it means you cannot change the catch to catch, and nor can you change to catches. So it will ever remain like this. So that makes it a non-finite verb. And since it is the only verb among the underlined words that qualifies these underlined words to be called an adverbial phrase instead of a clause. So from there, we're moving on to adverbial phrase of degree. Now we're moving on to another type. So it means now we've discussed adverbial phrase of place, manner, frequency, time. Now we are moving on to adverbial phrase of degree, which answers the question to what extent. Adverbial phrase of degree. Now this is D, adverbial phrase of degree. Now this answers the question to what extent. To what extent? Good. It answers the question to what extent. So you take note. Good. So when we say, for instance, if you say the editor hacked the manager's mobile phone with skill, for instance. Example 1, if we say the editor hacked the manager's phone with great deal of skill. Now, with great deal of skill is underlined here. So this is indicating the extent to which the manager's phone has been hacked. So this answers the question to what extent. So we call it adverbial phrase of degree. you see. So, but then in exam, just as I said earlier, you may just limit yourself to the name. Once you know the role the phrase plays is more of modifier, then you call it adverbial phrase and you stop there. And then it modifies the verb act. Then from there we move to the other one. Example 2, I love my wife with a great deal of respect. Or you can even say treat. I think that will be suitable here. I treat my wife with a great deal of respect. With a great deal of respect could be underlined here. Now, by looking at this, with a great deal of respect, so it's indicating to what extent do I treat my wife? You get the point. So it answers the question to what extent, and that makes it adverbial phrase of degree, and then it modifies the verb treat. Just as we discussed on the subject-verb agreement, the previous lesson, I, even though it is singular personal pronoun, it must always go with plural verb that is not inflected with S or ES. So you take note of that. You see, so we move on to then example 3. We say Lamin talks. Lamin talks a lot. Now, if you say Lamin talk a lot in the house. Now, if for instance you underline a lot in the house, now this is also indicating to what extent does Lamin talk. So a lot in the house, this a lot is also telling you that to the extent in which Lamin talks, so it becomes adverb phrase of degree, and then it also modifies the verb talks. Then we have another example. If you say Thunder mumble quite loudly. Thunder mumbled quite loudly. Now, Thunder mumbled quite loudly is underlined. This quite loudly is also adverb phrase of degree, and then it modifies the verb mumbled. You see, so basically that's it. So we are moving on to adverbial, another type, which is adverbial phrase of purpose. So it answers the question for what purpose. So this answers the question for what purpose. So we are moving on to adverbial phrase of purpose. Good. So adverbial phrase of purpose answers for what purpose? It answers the question for what purpose? For what purpose? Good. So it answers the question for what purpose. Now if we say example 1, if we say the plane landed so as to refuel. Now, so as to refuel is underlined. So this is an adverbial phrase of purpose. That's the purpose why the plane landed. So it answers the question, for what purpose does the plane land? So as to refuel. So this is an adverbial phrase of purpose, and then it modifies the verb landed. From there we move on to another example. If we say example 3, if we say Jennifer studied. Jennifer studied very hard in order to pass. Studied in order to pass her test. Now, Jennifer studied hard in order to pass her test. When you look at in order to pass her test, it's indicating for what purpose does Jennifer study. So therefore, it answers the question for what purpose. And since it is an adverbial phrase, it modifies the verb studied. So that's the point. So it means, just as I said earlier, once you identify it, you have an option to either indicate the exact type, or you just limit it to the main name. You can just call it adverbial phrase and stop. You can equally call it adverbial phrase of purpose, and you still get the same score. So there's no difference between the two. So then from there we move on to, if I say example 4, I sent my shoes for washing. Now if I say I send my shoes for washing, if for washing is underlined, so it is also an adverbial phrase of purpose. Why was the shoe sent? So it is meant to be washed. So for washing here is an adverbial phrase of purpose. Now let's look at functions of adverbial phrases. Now from the types and their examples. Already we talked about different types. We talked about adverbial phrase of place, manner, degree, purpose, frequency, time. So we are now going to look at functions of adverbial phrases. Functions. Now, functions, okay, we can just write here. Then let's look at functions of adverbial phrases. Now, already we know that adverbs have different functions. So also adverbial phrases, because we did say that any role an adverb plays, an adverbial phrase or clause will play the same role or equal role. So we have different functions. One role of adverbial phrase is that it modifies an adjective, you see, or it acts as modifiers of adjective. It modifies an adjective. So that's one thing you need to take note of. Or you can say it is modifiers, modifiers of adjective. So you take note of this. So it means adjectival phrase, one major function of adjectival phrase is to give additional information about an adjective. So any word that gives us more information about an adjective, we know is adverb. Therefore, any two or more words that equally play this equal role to that of adverb, we call it either adverbial phrase or clause, depending on whether there is a finite verb or not. So in this context, we are now looking at adverbial phrase, and we say it modifies an adjective, or we can call it modifiers of an adjective. So also, it modifies a verb. Now, it means any word which gives additional information about a particular verb, we call it an adverb. But now, if it is two or more words without a finite verb, and then it gives us additional information about a verb, we also call it an adverbial phrase. So, also we call it modifiers of a verb. Then 3, we have modifying another adverb. It modifies another adverb. So you take note. So it means now adverbs, they do not only modify an adjective, but also they modify verb as well as another adverb. So you may have two or more adverbs, and then one is also trying to modify the other one. We know very well you may have a verb that has been modified by an adverb, but equally in the same context, you may still have another adverb modifying the other one. So that's it. So anytime you have two or more, that means one or two is or are modifying one or the other. So that's it. That's what you need to take note of. So also, adverbs also modify verb phrase. For it modifies verb phrase. Good. When you have only one word, which is a verb, you call it verb. But if you have two verbs or more acting as a unit, you may call it a verb phrase. If you say departed, verb, have departed, verb phrase, has been departing, verb phrase. So it means if you have two or more verbs fused together and then acting as a unit, you can call it a verb phrase because two or more verbs has qualified to be called a verb phrase because you cannot call it a verb assuming if it is a word. So you take note of that. So we move on to adverb phrase modifying an adjective. Good. So we are going to start with this. Now adverb phrase modify an adjective. Now it means what we are coming to look at is that we are going to see in context how an adverb modifies an adjective. So that's the one. Now we have a adverbial phrase, adverbs modifying an adjective. Now, good. Now, how do we see this at work? Example, if we say the meeting became discontinuous after half an hour. Example, if we say the meeting became discontinuous after half an hour. Now, assuming we have after half an hour here. Now, the meeting became discontinuous. The adjective here is discontinuous. Now, I will circle that. Now, this is the adjective. And after half an hour, you see, is the adverbial phrase there, and then it modifies the adjective discontinuous. Example 2, Brikama United are famous for their skills. 2, Brikama United is famous for their skills. Now, here for their skills is the phrase here. It's an adverb phrase, and then it modifies the adjective famous. So now I'm going to ring the famous here to tell you that this modifies this, and this also modifies this one. You get the point? So it means now, functionally, these phrases are trying to give us more information about adjectives in this context. So you take note. So adverbs are not only limited to modifying verbs, but then adjectives as we have it here. Also another example is that the convict seemed unhappy about the judgment. The convict, for instance, I can say the criminal seems unhappy about the verdict or the judgment. Now, about the verdict, sorry, is on a line. Now, if we say the criminal seems unhappy about the verdict. Now, about the verdict, now this is telling us that this is a phrase, and it's an adverbial phrase, and then it modifies the adjective unhappy. Now, take note. Already this seems then unhappy. Now, when you look at here, what you need to take note is that when you look at these examples, these are adjectives because of one grammatical reason. Here, not just by looking at the word discontinuous, famous, unhappy in isolation, by looking at the context in which they are used, each of the three is preceded by a linking verb. In this context, became is a linking verb, is a linking verb, and then seems also is a linking verb. These two already is a linking verb, and for you to convince that already it belongs to primary auxiliary verb, you can change seems and became, they could be replaced by any of the linking verbs, still they will make sense. So that's something that you need to take note so that you know that they share one thing in common. They are all preceded by linking verbs. So that makes them to be called adjectives, because usually when a word is preceded by adjectives, so when words are preceded by linking verbs and then they make sense, then you know it is an adjective. Like become is an adjective is, seems, taste, sound, etc. Some of them, take note, some of them belong to two categories. They could be linking at the same time, main verb. Get the point? So some they could be linking at the same time auxiliary, like is in this context is alone, so it's linking. But if you have another verb, then it will play the role of an auxiliary verb. You get the point? So you take note. So in this, here let me just give you one example. So those of you who may not be very much convinced, the meeting became discontinuous. Became is past. You can say the meeting was. Get the point? Now, the criminal seems unhappy. You can say the criminal is unhappy. So they can be replaced by verbs to be, and still they'll make sense. So that's what you need to take note of. On to adverbs modifying an adjective. Now, that's one important thing. So adjectives are modified by adverbs. Example, the meeting became discontinuous after half an hour. After half an hour is an adverbial phrase, and it modifies the adjective discontinuous. Two, Brikama United are famous for their skills. So for their skills here is an adverbial phrase. It modifies the adjective famous. Number three, the criminal seems unhappy about the verdict. So the criminal seems unhappy about the verdict. That's the judgment. So here, this also is an adverbial phrase, and it modifies the adjective unhappy. So that's for you to take note of that. When you look at this, became, are, and is, seems, they are all linking verbs, and they are connecting the adjectives with the rest. So from there, we move on to adverbial adverbs modifying a verb. Now, B, adverbs modifying verbs. Good. That's very important. Now, adverbs also give us additional information about a verb in a sentence. You see, now let's look at here. It says, the thief rushed. Now, good. Now, the thief rushed out of the room. Now, this out of the room is the adverbial phrase here. Now, it modifies the verb rushed. You get the point? So, it's an adverbial phrase. It modifies the verb rushed. Example 2, they presented quite impressively. 2, they teach quite impressively. Now, quite impressively is on a line. They teach quite impressively. This quite impressively is an adverbial phrase, and then it modifies the verb teach. You get the point? 2, the voice came from the office. The voice came from the office. Now, assuming you have this, the voice came from the office. Now, this from the office is also indicating place. So it is adverbial phrase, and then it modifies the verb came. Now, the last one, example 4, we say Binta worked very seriously indeed. Binta worked very seriously indeed. Now, very seriously indeed is on a line here. So this is an adverbial phrase. It modifies the verb worked. You get the point? So let's move on to the third point, adverbs, phrase modifying an adverb. So adverbs modifying another adverb. Now, if we say adverbs modifying another adverb. Now, it means, in this one, it means you'll have C, you'll have an adverb that is being modified by another one. Example, Obama has been campaigning in all the swing states. Obama, example 1, Obama has been campaigning in all the swing states. Now, in all the swing states, get the point, is the adverbial phrase here, and then it modifies the verb phrase has been campaigning, modifying another adverb. Now, just let's look at this example that we discussed earlier. Binta worked very seriously indeed. When you look at all these three words here, they are adverbs. Now, this very seriously indeed. Good. So the three acting as a unit, they modify the verb worked. You get the point. But now as you see, very seriously indeed. Binta worked indeed. This very is modifying this other adverb indeed. And this very also modifies this adverb seriously. So that's how it goes. So it means you may have two or more adverbs. So anytime you have such, it means the other one is acting as a modifier of the other. You get the point? So let's look at a few examples. If you say the principal one, the principal acted rather wisely. Now, if we underline rather wisely, get the point? It's a phrase, because as we said, it doesn't matter whether you have two or more words. What is important is that it cannot be one word, and it can be as many words as you can write. But then what is clear is that whether it is two or more, once there is no finite verb, it's a phrase. And since rather wisely, you get the point. So this is also, when you look at here, we have two, this thing, adverb. We are now going to look at adverbs modifying another adverb. Example, if we say the principal acted rather too wisely. Now, assuming we have too wisely. Now, this too wisely is underlined. Now, you see the principal acted rather. So, it means this too wisely is an adverbial phrase, and it modifies the adverb rather. From that, we move on. Every weekend, Aja comes here. Now, every weekend. Now, example, if we say every weekend, Aja comes here. Now, when you look at here, every weekend is underlined. This is an adverbial phrase. You get the point. And then it modifies the adverb here. You get the point. It modifies the adverb here. So it means here is an adverb. You see, it's being modified by the phrase every weekend. From there, we move on to adverbial phrase modifying a verb phrase. That's going to be our last part. The adverb phrase, adverbial phrase modifying verb phrases or verb phrase. Now, we may have this adverbial phrase modifying verb phrase. Example, we say Osama or Obama, for instance. Obama has been campaigning in all the swing states. In all the swing states. Now, in all the swing states here is an adverbial phrase. You get the point? And then this modifies the verb phrase has been campaigning. Now, I told you earlier, if you have two or more verbs, you cannot call it verb anymore, you call it verb phrase, because even though they act as unit. In this, you cannot say verb only, you say verb phrase. If it were only campaign or has or been on its own, you can say a verb. But once they are acting as a unit, you call it a verb phrase. So this is an adverbial phrase, and then it modifies the verb phrase has been campaigning. Then another example is this. Yusufa has gone to the garden. 2. If I say Yusufa has gone to the garden. Now, by looking at this, now Yusufa has gone to the garden. To the garden is the adverbial phrase here. You get the point? And then it modifies the verb phrase has gone. By looking at this, we have two verbs here, has and gone. And now this has is the auxiliary or helping verb, while the gone is the main verb here. So it means this to the garden is an adverbial phrase, and then it modifies the verb phrase has gone. Now we move on to the last one, example 3. We say she must have arrived immediately after midnight. Immediately after midnight. After midnight. Immediately after midnight. So when you look at here, immediately after midnight is also an adverbial phrase, and then it modifies the verb phrase have arrived. So this verb phrase is being modified by the adverbial phrase. So basically that is for the different function or role of adverbial phrases. So that's the functions of adverbial phrases. You get the point? So now we are moving on to positions of adverbial phrases. So you take note. Now, when we have two or more adverbial phrases, how do we position them? You see, so our next class, we are going to look at how we position adverbial phrases. If we have adverbial phrases of time, manner, degree, frequency, etc., which one comes before the other? So that is going to be part of our next lesson. So on that note, I would like to give you the usual advice that you stay at home, follow our lessons, and then always wash your hands with soap and water, use hand sanitizers, and avoid light crowds. Until I come your way next class, have a nice day.